The plate smashed against the wall just inches from my head, with pieces of porcelain falling like angry tears. "Get out," I shouted. Maria screamed and grabbed another plate. "Anthony runs things now. We don't need you anymore." I stayed firm, watching my stepmother's face twist with anger. Behind her, my stepbrother Anthony smirked, wearing my dad's chef coat. The coat had been his pride for 30 years, but now it hung loosely on Anthony's shoulders, with Meros stitched in faded gold on the pocket. "My name is Isabella Romano, and until 2 months ago, I was the sous chef at Meros, the Italian restaurant my father built from scratch. I spent 15 years there, starting as a dishwasher when I was 13, learning every recipe and technique that made our food special. But now, with Dad gone, everything I worked for was lost." "You can't do this," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the anger inside. "Dad wanted me to run the restaurant. Everyone knows that." Maria laughed, her voice sharp. "Everyone knows. Where's the proof? The will says everything goes to me, and I say Anthony's in charge. You're just the help, and you're fired." I glanced at Anthony, leaning against the prep station like he owned it. He'd only shown up 6 months ago, right after Dad was diagnosed. Maria's 25-year-old son from her first marriage, who suddenly cared about the family business after ignoring it for years. "You don't even know how to cook," I said to him. "You've never worked a day in this kitchen." He shrugged, adjusting my dad's coat. "I'm a quick learner. Besides, how hard can it be? Follow the recipes, make it nice, collect the money. Simple." The word simple hit me hard. He had no idea what running Morrow's took: the trips to the market for the best ingredients, hours of prep work, the family recipes we guarded, the long relationships with suppliers. "The recipes," I said slowly. "You think you can just walk in and make Dad's food?" Maria's smile wavered. "Don't be ridiculous. All the recipes are here in the kitchen. We don't need you." I cut her off, feeling a small spark of satisfaction as her face drained of color. "Dad never wrote down the real recipes. He taught them to me, step by step, over the years. What you have are just the basic recipes we give to the prep cooks," I said. "You're lying." Anthony snapped, but I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. "Try making Dad's marinara sauce from those recipe cards and see how it compares to what our customers expect. Or the tiramisu that won Best Dessert in Chicago 3 years running. Good luck matching that." Maria stormed toward me, grabbing my arm. "You think you're so clever. We'll figure it out. Now get out of my restaurant before I call the police." I yanked my arm free, standing tall. "Your restaurant? Everything here, every dish, every technique, every secret that makes this place special came from Dad, from our family, not yours." Maria's voice dripped with venom. "I was his wife. You're just his daughter from his first marriage. I have the papers, the will, everything. You have nothing." Her words stung, but I didn't let them see me cry. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my father's lucky coin, the 1943 steel penny he carried every day since opening the restaurant. He gave it to me the night before he passed, telling me to keep it safe and I'd know when to use it. I didn't understand then, but I did now. Maria's eyes locked onto the coin. "That belongs to the restaurant. Give it to me." I closed my fingers around it and started backing toward the door. "You have the restaurant, Maria, but Dad left me something more valuable than property or papers. When you figure out what that is, you'll know where to find me." I walked out of Merrill's for the last time, ignoring Maria's shouts behind me. The late afternoon sun painted the Chicago streets gold, just like the thread on my father's chef coat. Tears finally came as I reached my car, but I wiped them away quickly. Dad had taught me more than just recipes. He taught me patience, persistence, and planning. Most importantly, he taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything to come back stronger. I started the engine, watching Anthony and Maria argue through the restaurant's front window. They thought they'd won, that they'd taken everything from me. But Dad's last lesson was still to come, and they had no idea what was coming their way. 3 months after being thrown out of Merrill's, I stood in my tiny apartment kitchen, perfecting the last details. The marinara sauce simmered on the stove, its aroma bringing back memories of countless mornings beside my father, learning exactly when to add each ingredient. My phone buzzed with a text from Neha, my best friend who had been a waitress at Merrill's for a decade before Maria fired her too. "It's bad, Bella, really bad. They lost the Rosini wedding booking." I wasn't surprised. The Rosini family had been loyal customers for 20 years, celebrating every milestone at Maro's. According to NAA's regular updates, the restaurant was losing longtime patrons. Anthony's simplified versions of Dad's recipes weren't fooling anyone. Another text came through. Maria's desperate. She's trying to hire her way out of it. Third chef this month, I smiled, stirring the sauce. Let them scramble. The timing was perfect. The coin Dad gave me, his lucky steel penny, sat on the counter next to a worn leather notebook I'd found the day after his funeral. It had been hidden in his old recipe box, where he told me to look. Inside the notebook were his real recipes, written in his careful handwriting. Along with them was something else, a note to a small storefront 3 blocks from Maro's. For my Isabella, the no raid. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Love, Dad. The storefront had been empty for years, but Dad had kept paying the rent, quietly planning ahead even as his health failed. Now, after months of late nights and spending every penny of my savings, it was almost ready. My phone rang with an unknown number. Isabella Romano. I answered, already knowing who it was. Miss Romano, this is James Wheeler from the Chicago Restaurant Association. I'm calling about the nomination. Yes, Mr. Wheeler, I said, standing taller. The committee has reviewed your application for the Rising Star Chef competition. We're intrigued by your concept, a modern take on traditional Italian cuisine. I looked around my test kitchen at the recipes I'd spent months adapting and perfecting, Dad's classics with my own twists, honoring tradition while embracing innovation. That's right, I replied. Everything is made from scratch, using techniques passed down through generations. Fascinating, Wheeler said, especially given your background at Maro's. I understand there's been quite a change in management there recently. You could say that. Well, Miss Romano, the committee would like to invite you to compete. The event is in 6 weeks. As you know, the winner receives significant press coverage and investment funding. I gripped the phone tighter. I'll be there. After hanging up, I picked up Dad's coin and ran my thumb over its worn surface. The competition would put me head-to-head with Chicago's best up-and-coming chefs. More importantly, it would put me in a spotlight exactly where I needed to be. My phone buzzed again. You won't believe this. Anthony just tried to make Dad's woo for a food critic. It was a disaster. The review goes live tomorrow. Perfect timing. The next morning, the Chicago Tribune's scathing review of Maro's went viral. It was described as a pale imitation of its former glory. The critic wrote, "Whatever magic made Marco special has vanished, replaced by mediocrity and pretension." I was in my new kitchen when Maria finally called. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with forced politeness. "About what?" "The recipes? The real ones. Name your price." I laughed softly. "They're not for sale, Maria. Neither is Dad's legacy." "Don't be stupid," she snapped, her facade cracking. "This is business. Everything has a price." "Not everything," I replied. "But don't worry, you'll be seeing me soon enough." I hung up before she could respond, returning to my prep work. The Rising Star competition was 5 weeks away, and I had a statement to make. In his notebook, on the last page, Dad had written something I now understood. Success is the best revenge, but timing is everything. Wait until they're desperate, then show them what they threw away. The night of the Rising Star competition arrived. Chicago's culinary elite packed the grand ballroom of the Palmer House. 8 chef stations lined the walls, my position directly across from the judges' table. I tied on my apron, simple black cotton, no flashy logos or names, just the steel penny now fashioned into a pin, catching the light. "Chef Romano," a judge approached. "Your menu concept is interesting. Reimagined Italian classics." I nodded, arranging my ingredients. My father's recipes adapted for modern tastes. "Your father?" The judge's eyes widened with recognition. "Marco Romano." Before I could answer, commotion erupted at the entrance. Maria and Anthony burst in. Her face flushed with anger. "She can't compete," Maria shouted, pointing at me. "Those are our recipes, our property." The room fell silent. Head Judge Wheeler stepped forward, frowning. "Mrs. Romano, this is a private event. If you have concerns—" "I have proof," Maria interrupted, waving a folder full of documents. "I own all rights to Marco's recipes and techniques." I continued prepping, letting her make a scene. Everything was going exactly as planned. Mrs. Romano, Wheeler said firmly, this competition judges original interpretations of classical cuisine. Chef Isabella's menu, while inspired by her father's work, consists of her own creations. Let them stay, I called out, not looking up from my station. Let them watch. Wheeler hesitated, then nodded. Security escorted Maria and Anthony to seats near the judge's table. Over the next 2 hours, I cooked with a focus I inherited from my father. Each dish was a tribute and a transformation. His marinara sauce, lightened with roasted cherry tomatoes. His osso buco, reimagined with short ribs and modern plating. When I presented my final course, tiramisu deconstructed into elegant components, I heard gasps from the judges. Even Maria had fallen silent. This is Marco's tiramisu, Wheeler said after taking another bite, closing his eyes. Elevated. Familiar, yet completely new. I smiled, touching the penny on my apron. My father taught me that tradition isn't about freezing the past. It's about carrying it forward. The judges conferred briefly, then Wheeler stood. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner, Chef Isabella Romano. The applause was thunderous as cameras flashed. I saw Maria and Anthony slip toward the exit, but I wasn't done. Thank you, I said into the microphone. 3 months ago, I lost my place in my father's kitchen, but he left me something more valuable than a restaurant. He left me his knowledge, his techniques, and his dream of evolution. I turned to face the crowd. That's why I'm proud to announce the opening of New Marco's. Not a replacement for the original, but a continuation of his legacy, a place where tradition meets innovation, where the past guides us into the future. The room erupted again. Restaurant critics mobbed me with questions about the opening date. Investors pressed cards into my hands. Later that night, alone in my new restaurant space, I raised a glass to Dad's photo. You planned this all along, didn't you? I whispered. Knew they'd push me out. Knew I'd need to make my way. The next morning, Nana sent one final update. Maria had listed marrows for sale. Without the real recipes, without the soul that Dad had infused into every dish, they couldn't keep it alive. 6 months later, New Marco's opened to rave reviews. The line stretched around the block. Old customers mixed with new fans. The steel penny hung above the door, watching over a packed dining room where tradition and innovation danced on every plate. Maria and Anthony disappeared from Chicago's restaurant scene. Last I heard, they'd moved to Florida to try their luck there, but their failure wasn't my victory. My success was. Dad's notebook now sits in my office, its pages annotated with my own notes and adaptations. Sometimes late at night, I imagine him watching me in the kitchen, smiling as I teach my own staff the proper way to make marinara sauce. Not exactly the way he taught me, but close enough that his legacy lives on. And in the end, that's what he wanted all along, not for me to preserve the past, but to carry it forward into the future. Every night before service, I touch the steel penny above the door and whisper, Grazie, Papa. Thank you for teaching me that the greatest revenge isn't destroying what others build. It's building something better of your own. That's a lesson worth more than any recipe.